Thank you for listening. I'm your host, Kerrie Jordan. Welcome to our show where we hear from supply chain leaders and manufacturing leaders who are driving the future of this great industry. Now, today I'm speaking with two guests, Ramji Mani, the Vice President, Digital Supply Chain Ecosystem and Executive Board, and Jennifer Chu, Vice President and Head of Solutions and Consulting. Now, both of my guests are with Bristlecone. Now, Bristlecone is a global pure play supply chain consulting and systems integration firm. It was founded in 1998 and headquartered in San Jose, California. Bristlecone is part of the Mahindra Group and has completed over 300 engagements across more than 20 industry verticals. It partners with major solution providers to deliver integrated supply chain, procurement, and analytics solutions. Bristlecone is known for its process optimization, change management, risk resilience, and is recognized as a top provider of supply chain services and system integration worldwide. Now, my guest, Ramji Mani, is responsible for overseeing the strategy, execution, and growth of specialized supply chain services. In addition to his time with Bristlecone, he held leadership roles at Cognizant and Satyam Computer Services, which later became part of Tech Mahindra. Now, my other guest, Jennifer Chu, is driving the company's consulting-led approach. She champions being solution-oriented and incorporates leading practices across people, process, data, and technology to create resilience in the supply chain. Now, previously in her career, she's held leadership roles at TCS's consulting and service integration team, Deloitte Consulting, IBM, PwC, and Forrester Research. Now, I'm excited to have two supply chain experts for this conversation. Ramji and Jennifer, welcome and thank you for joining the show.
Thank you for having us. We're excited to be here.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let's go and get started. So first, we'd love to get to know both of you a little bit more. So Jen, if you could maybe go first, would you share a bit about your journey and what brought you to Bristlecone?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I'd be happy to. And thank you for having us. This was a great conversation and excited to go a little deeper with you here today. I have been working at the intersection of supply chain and technology for my entire career, whether or not I was working as a hands-on consultant, working for SAP, doing marketing and strategy work, authoring one of the first Forrester waves on ERP systems, and now leading consulting practices. So it's been nice to be sort of on all sides of it, working with some of the world's largest and most complex manufacturing and supply chain environments. What has been appealing to me about Bristlecone, where I've been now for the last year and a half, is that we look at the end-to-end supply chain from a purpose-driven perspective to make sure that we're really helping to deliver value for the client. Now, that's an interesting statement because sometimes value is defined differently. So, for example, we do work with the Canadian Blood Organization, and for them, value is making sure that they get, life-saving blood to the patient in a timely fashion. For other companies, it's very much getting the product on the shelves and making sure that things are never out of stock. And for others, it's much more about the bottom line. So however our clients are defining value, that's what we help to create, is that end-to-end supply chain vision and execution for them to deliver on their purpose. We do that in a way that combines people, process, data, and technology. And that's one of the reasons why Ramji and I are both on the phone, because it takes all of those different capabilities being brought together, technology with Ramji with more of a tech lens, me with more of a people and process lens, to make sure that we're delivering a holistic solution.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's great. That's great to get to know your background and what really drives you, Jennifer. Ramji, would love to get to know you. Same question. What has brought you to Bristlecone?
I guess a combination of things. So I started like a production planner where it was all on paper. There was no technology. It was pre-ERP days also. And then I joined the erstwhile I2 technology, which goes by Blue Yonder now, which sort of defined the industry of supply chain advanced planning systems as it is known now. And one thing led to another, and I thought I should dirty my hands in the system integrator space, which I did. So you get to know the product space, you get to know the system integrator space, the consulting part behind it. And I thought Bristlecone is a great place where, as Jen nicely put it, it is people, process, data, and technology all come together to deliver value, and value can be defined differently. We just recently acquired a customer where for them value is to build the door for the cheapest price and have it ready at every outlet. Cannot name the customer yet. Or the other thing is that value can also be how do I get my energy drink into every supermarket and every aisle in the supermarket on time and full. So value is different, but the value we have internally is the value is that we will be the best partner of choice for our customers. And we all in the executive team drive towards that one common goal and common vision.
Excellent. Okay, so thank you both for this background, because it is interesting as we get into this. You both have that broad vision across the supply chain, but then of course expertise within your areas, like within technology and within consulting. And then how do you translate that to business outcomes and ensuring that the people are in line, processes are in line. So this is great. I'm really glad to get into it. So one of my first questions for you both is around myths when it comes to the supply chain. So maybe Jen, if I could ask you first, what are some of the biggest supply chain myths that you see that are, maybe costing manufacturers this year and then potentially even leading into next year?
What's getting the most oxygen right now is that AI is going to solve everything. That you're going to be able to run your shop floor and your supply chain planning in a completely hands-off way, right? Obviously, AI is going to have massive implications in moving towards that vision, but I don't think humans are ever completely out of the loop. So I think that's probably the biggest myth we spend time with on clients today. From a more tactical perspective, I think most of our clients think their data is pretty good. Most clients' data is not. So there's a big disconnect in the reality around, how, and if you don't have the data, then your processes are operating on, a poor foundation. You certainly couldn't automate the way that AI myth would require. So I think there's a big disconnect there on the data side. I assume, Ramji, you've got other pieces that you would add to that answer beyond the AI and the data. What do you see?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest myth people think is that if I implement technology as is, all my supply chain problems will go away. But that is not correct. Actually, you need to fix your processes to make sure that the processes can support what the business needs, and that gets translated into technology. And obviously, if you do that and you get the data right, AI can help. But it's the old thing where you don't put everything you do today into tomorrow's technology. You actually relook at what you need to do and then put it into the new technology. And that's where maybe to some extent now SAP is talking about clean core and industry processes, where they're saying don't bring in all your customization from ECC R3 into the S4, but actually keep it outside of it so that we can easily do upgrades, so on and so forth. So yeah, that's one of the biggest, the technology is gonna fix everything. It does not.
Yeah. If we can dig a little bit deeper into these topic areas. So given that these are, myths and maybe some misperceptions around them, when a company thinks differently about these areas, when they think differently about AI, data, ensuring that processes are aligned with the business outcome that you're looking to achieve, which might take, some rewrite or rethinking. When they're thinking differently about these areas, what are some of the opportunities that they might see? What are some of the benefits of doing that?
I like to always go back to basics, right? And so for me, that's thinking around a value-centric roadmap and, looking at how complicated and complex, right, the practicality of implementing that solution, along with what's the benefit that you would eventually get, right? And that intersection of the two, the effectiveness and the outcome, should help guide the client in what to tackle first and to be realistic about the expectations. And then you can create an executable plan where you take the myth out of it, right? Because you're now working with a robust business value, hopefully KPI supported plan that you can hold yourselves accountable to. And you get out of sort of the daydream mode and into practical, measurable, executable manufacturing and supply chain.
Yeah, I echo that. I think KPIs are important. KPIs, again, mean many things to many people. So it could be on time in full, could be cost of goods sold, could be customer service levels, could be inventory turns, could be, I learned a new term a couple of days back, AOG, aircraft on ground. The KPIs, as long as you define the KPIs you want to actually measure your business against, it becomes a lot easier because then all your process data can and technology can go all in one direction towards that. And it's best to define that in the early part of the project, which used to be called ROI before. It's called value, it's called KPI, but it's all the same thing. You just need to define what you're going to win, get out of it.
hmm So when it comes to investing in new technologies for the supply chain, how do you recommend an organization go forward with that? Do you start with the KPIs, or do you start with the existing environment and challenges that they might be seeing? How do you begin that process?
We probably see clients all over the place, right? There are some clients who know they've got, an existing piece of technology that support is going to run out on. And so they've got a burning platform that they've just got to address, right? That's easy from a change management perspective, right? It's do or die. In other cases, clients know that there's something not working or sub-optimized, but they actually need to go through and do the research to try to figure out where, the bottlenecks really are, in which case going back to KPIs and comparing against benchmarks and figuring out what really truly is broken and needs to be prioritized first. Because what we want to help avoid is fixing what looks like the easy thing when really it's not going to make a difference in moving the needle. So if you don't have a burning platform, then I think you go back to KPIs and to enable you to prioritize on what's really going to make a difference in improving the supply chain.
Ramji, where do you typically see organizations beginning?
Typically right now, it is, if you ask an SAP customer, it is the scare of end of life of ECC, right? They have to move to S4. So that could be a need to do it. But I would more or less say that, that should not be the only reason. It should be, what do I need to do to help improve my top line and bottom line? And what are the KPIs with it? If you can measure them and quantify them, it makes much easier than just having a technical upgrade.
The other starting point that we're seeing right now significantly is managing in and around all of the changes with tariffs and the global economic situation. I think a lot of folks are trying to both respond to, right, the change of the day, but also trying to look, 2 and 3 and 4 years out, because, creating moving manufacturing is not an easy or short task. And so I think there are a lot of supplier relationship and collaboration programs underway to try to address that. There's a lot of network optimization projects happening around that might not have been on somebody's roadmap a year ago. And so there is a bit of responsiveness to those sorts of outside or external challenges that initiate some of these big projects as well.
What are some of the initiatives that you see underway? When I've been working or speaking with other business leaders, many of them are talking about building up inventory, stockpiling inventory at the expense, of having that additional inventory just to kind of protect themselves. Others are looking to move manufacturing operations in region. What are some of the ways in which you see organizations responding?
Yeah, pre-buying for sure was a major approach, especially when the tariffs were, expected to take place on August 1st, right? There was a window that you could get ahead of it. We're seeing companies change their sourcing to go through third party or third countries. And then there's the larger change of just moving manufacturing out of China and in region, as we're talking about, if not all the way back into the United States itself. But those are multi-year decisions, right? Hundreds of millions or billions of dollars to execute. So I don't think that people were rushing to move manufacturing all the way back into the US, but where they already had plans for a China plus one strategy, they certainly started to accelerate those plans.
And how does technology play a role here? Because, some have been looking at the forecasting ability, pricing optimization, potentially leveraging AI solutions. But when it comes to specifically dealing with some of these latest trends, have you seen an uptick in interest in these types of technologies, or is it more business strategy responses? What are you seeing?
So procurement as an industry had gone a little bit slow, whereas there was more investment in integrated business planning and warehouse management and execution. But with this introduction of tariff, where you can actually do strategic sourcing based on what I need to buy from which country will give me the lowest tariff, there is now renewed interest in how to actually implement these kind of solutions, right? And there's been new releases from multiple strategic sourcing vendors on, hey, here's an updated version, this can help. There have been some webinars from planning companies which talk about how tariffs can be managed or how you can overcome the tariff to some extent by better proactive planning. But has anything been implemented? I don't know for sure. Maybe it's still in the works. Jen, do you know anything?
Yeah, certainly been an uptick in focus on scenario planning and what if analysis because we're seeing companies do a lot more experimentation on the supply planning side to minimize the import fees. And then I probably should have added this to my earlier answer, Kerrie, when you said what else are companies doing to manage tariffs. In some of our clients, we're seeing full sale, change in their customer base where they're actually just not even going to sell within the US anymore. They're just going to work around the US and they have been focusing on building up their European customers and just avoiding the whole thing and waiting out or hopefully waiting out the tariff situation. So that's been an interesting scenario. And in that case, right, their technology solution has been more around customer acquisition and CRM systems. Whereas I think most companies who aren't taking that extreme approach, it's more around planning and supplier management technology.
Interesting. Okay. So when you're working with organizations like this that are looking to, undertake an initiative such as, changing their markets or changing their sourcing providers, when you're diagnosing a supply chain and any challenges, what are some red flags that stand out to you? What indicates that there's a challenge here in the supply chain, and how do you hone in on that with the business leader to address it?
Yeah, I'll give you one non-obvious one, right? This client thought that their supply chain was pretty well managed because they had a 99% customer service level, right? That's what everybody wants. They always want to be able. It turned out that they were killing their margins because it was a consumer packaged goods company, and some of their products just weren't profitable, and yet they were still maintaining a 99% customer service level on that when they really should have let that product die a natural death, right? And so what turned out is they were not managing right their A and their B and their C products. And, so we just went in and did some simple analysis on the inventory movements and quickly eliminated some of those lower margin, slow moving products and dropped their customer service level by design down to just 97%. And all of a sudden their margins are across the board. So what maybe looks like on the surface level, well-oiled machine really was costing them money. And so with very little impact to, the end customer here, we were able to save them a lot of money just by better management of their inventory.
That's interesting. What looked like a very green flag was actually showing that there were some other problems to dig into. And it was really that comprehensive look across the board. Interesting. Ramji, if you were to kind of point out any challenges that really stand out to you when you diagnose a supply chain, what are those red flags for you?
Well, one thing, I was having a conversation just 2 days back with a prospect, and they have a backlog of $1 billion of spare parts not being fulfilled, $1 billion of revenue, which they're sitting on by not fulfilling because they can't actually get the suppliers to supply in full on time. They were trying to chase the fact that they could not fulfill the $1 billion of orders, but the problem was not that they could not fulfill. They never actually had the parts in stock. So it's a complete flip around. So something which went from, hey, I'm gonna fix this, now they gotta fix something else. And that was done by just a quick analysis of their order management, their order profiling, and the backlog profiling, and that got us to that solution. So hopefully they will do something about it now. But yes, you do have obvious pointers, but you tend to turn a blind eye to it.
And for these types of organizations that maybe have been running supply chain for years, decades, maybe even the same way, and you are approaching them with a supply chain transformation, how do you navigate that with the business leaders who, again, have been doing, something for a long period of time, and clearly a change needs to be made, but maybe there's some resistance to that. How do you navigate that?
This is my domain. This is where we bring in not just the technology and the process work, but the change management. And so helping understanding the why of the change is incredibly important. And then so that may be well understood at the executive level, right? The folks that were approving the spend on the project. But when you think about the dozens or hundreds or thousands of folks who are impacted by this change, if they don't also understand the why, then you very likely are going to run into resistance in adopting those changes. So understanding the why and communicating that frequently, right? Because folks are busy. And if you're not full-time on that project, odds are like you hear it once, it doesn't stick. You hear it twice, maybe it starts to sound familiar. You hear it 5 or 6 times and you finally start to ingest it and understand it. So that's certainly one thing that a lot of organizations underestimate, the amount of effort and time that takes. The other mistake that I frequently see organizations make when managing a large transformation is they keep adding these changes on top of things without taking away something else, right? And so there's only so much capacity that an organization has to change. And so that really needs to be carefully managed, because otherwise all the good intentions that you have are just going to not be able to be executed by the rank and file in the organization, not because they don't want to, not because they don't believe in it, but they just can't take on one more project.
All right. Well, that's really interesting to get that perspective. And I do want to turn a little bit more deeply into technology. On this show, we love to explore different types of technology across the supply chain, across manufacturing. And so maybe Ramji, this question I think would be for you. What are some of the latest technologies that you see organizations adopting within supply chain?
I would say that we both said before, right? Because everything has to be AI. So there are things about how do I use AI chatbots or AI things in my warehouse to ensure I don't have issues with my big back shit, right? So that's something new which is coming up. Then you have things like planning.ai, which a product company has released, which says that it'll do all the planning and the planner only has to do the exception management as long as I give the upper limit and the lower limits. The other thing is product is talking about self-healing supply chains, which means that I have a supply chain, I plan, I do what if analysis, I plan, I replan, and then the planning engine becomes so smart that if it sees there's something wrong, it actually can heal itself and give recommendations. You just got to trust it. So these are some of the things which planning companies are doing. And obviously then there's AI on top of standalone planning, AI on top of forecasting, which used to be called demand sensing before, but now it's AI-led forecasting. You have AI-led fulfillment. You can do AI-led route planning for your transportation. You can do AI-led tendering and loading. But then people, while it may exist, planners are not willing to let go because everything has got a cost involved. If I get the tendering and loading wrong, instead of going to, say, a C.H. Robinson, I go to a different load carrier, it might cost me a lot more. So there are small steps you can take, but you can't just completely do everything on AI. You have to take those baby steps, and the baby steps, what are the use cases and how do I do it? So that's my perspective of it. Jen, you want to add, please?
I think you said it well. I think the biggest risk or one of the risks that I run into from the consulting lens is to not lay technology on top of problem areas, right? To the point that you made earlier, Ramji. Applying tech on top of bad processes doesn't do anyone any good, and in fact can cause a lot of harm that just has to be unwound in future implementations. So to me, less is more on the technology front. And it just needs to be really well thought out and really well planned and really well integrated into that overall architecture. You can certainly be creative. There's lots of different leading edge technologies that can be meaningful, but not when just slammed in, right? Or without a thought to the end-to-end process. So.
Mm-hmm. And Jen, if you could help us look through the marketing hype of AI, you kind of mentioned it earlier on too, when we were talking initially about, the myths of supply chain, that AI can solve everything. What does a successful AI implementation look like? I also have in my mind how you had said it's important to go back to the fundamentals. I totally agree with that. I think, whenever you're making a major investment, you should look to the fundamentals of a strong business case, ROI, defining KPIs, these kinds of things. But once you get through that and you've implemented some of these technologies, such as Ramji mentioned, Jen, you've talked about, what does a successful implementation of an AI solution look like?
There's a couple of things that I see in a successful AI roadmap. A year ago, everybody had pilots going on, right? And those pilots tended to be very horizontal in nature. And we probably all now have some sort of AI that we're using every day, right? Whether it's Copilot to help us with our emails or, note takers in our Teams environment, right? That capture our to-dos in our group chats. What we've seen, though, over the last 12 months is migration towards more use cases, specifically within supply chain and on the shop floor. But they're still pilot mode. And so what's keeping them from being scaled globally does go back to the data. They're finding that in that pilot, there was so much data cleanup to do, right? That has slowed down any sort of ability to scale it globally. Or the pilot wasn't really solving the right issue, right? Going back to, are we applying the technology in the places where it is most needed? Or it was something that was maybe an experiment within the plant and it wasn't necessarily part of a global manufacturing strategy. And so you may have had great learnings in one small process or function or location, but there wasn't necessarily buy-in from the rest of the organization. Because everybody is doing something on the AI front, but it's not necessarily synchronized yet. And so those are some of the typical challenges that we're seeing. I think coming into the back half of this year and into early next calendar year, organizations, the business is getting their hands around those projects. We're moving out of I heard the phrase recently, pilot paralysis, right? You just keep experimenting and you never actually, take the learnings and then apply it holistically. So I think businesses are starting to say enough of this. Now let's get serious and put that robust transformation management around all these AI experiments. I think the second is the application vendors themselves are starting to mature their own AI capabilities. And so there's more built in, there's more native, right? That's starting to be embedded in the major SaaS and ERP vendors. And so there's more familiarity with, and there's more global span of some of those processes. And I think folks are recognizing that there are some interesting use cases that are unique to some of those specialized pieces of the organization, like planning or like collaboration, that aren't necessarily things that all 100,000 people in the organization need to use, but they're very specific use cases for a set of relatively small but sophisticated end users where an early AI deployment can be really impactful. And that's where I think we're starting to see, like the scenario planning that we talked about earlier. I think that's where we're seeing some of the early AI wins. Another area where we're seeing AI get some real momentum behind it is around digital twin, right? And simulating your shop floor or simulating your supply network. I think there's a lot of energy around the AI enablement or the digital twin technology, and I expect that to really be a significant global success over the next 12 months or so.
I agree. Many of my guests discuss digital twins, and it is interesting to see what that technology has as far as like potential and benefits to the supply chain. If I could ask you both, changing gears a bit, but also related because we need to solve tough problems here, and that is sustainability. Many times, an organization is looking to improve sustainability, long term sustainability across the supply chain. When you are working with your clients, how do they balance sustainability in the supply chain with productivity, efficiency, and revenue generating types of initiatives?
I think it varies widely based on the industry. The more consumer facing industries are sometimes being pushed there by their own clients. You see circularity and sustainability is like a very high priority for a company like an H&M because they're using that as a sales tool, right? Whereas some B2B manufacturers, really it's still just about the bottom line. So unless sustainability is saving them money, they're probably not prioritizing it beyond including it on an RFP checklist for their own suppliers, right? And I see a big span in how much sustainability is really embedded. If they can see a bottom line impact, everybody's doing it, but otherwise it's consumer driven or regulatory driven, right? There's certainly some baseline requirements, especially in Europe, that are more impactful than what we have here in the US currently.
Agreed.
I would say the Europe is more faster and quicker to adapt because of regulatory. There are some very European specific tools which track your ESG in manufacturing and CPG life sciences in Europe, which is trying to make its way into the US, but they actually are certified by the Green Council or whatever they call it in Europe, as well as certified by SAP. So there are some products which can capture it, but how well it is implemented and as Jen said, whether it's just a tick mark or whether it's actually really doing it needs to be seen. But there is definitely a push, and you can see it again, as Jen said, in the consumer packaged good industry, where now packaging is very sustainable. They're taking a lot of pass. They're taking the thickness out of the corrugated boxes. They're taking the number of the ink which goes into it is biodegradable now. It's not something which is going to pollute. There's less plastic, so on and so forth. So anything which is consumer buying has got more focus than I said B2B, and let's not even get into energy and utilities and all that.
Yeah, I was going to say that water is an area, though, that we're starting to see some more focus around. When you can reduce the amount of water, especially in certain geographies, you save immediately on manufacturing costs. Some of the recent Gartner research, they do a top 25 supply chain research every year. And one of the top 3 initiatives around from their top 25 was around reducing the use of water. So that has started to move up in importance, at least among the more sophisticated supply chain organizations.
Interesting. Okay. Thank you both for your perspectives on that and what you've seen happening out in the field. Now, if I could ask you about advice and guidance. So, and Jen, maybe we'll start with you. When you are working with business leaders across supply chain, what advice or guidance do you provide to them if they're maybe looking to grow their organization, if they're in a tough spot and they need to make a change? What do you, and actually, if I can also ask you about career advice, because I think you've had a really interesting trajectory. So just, advice in general, what are some of the items that you share with others?
Yeah, no, it's interesting that you tie those things back together because I think the workforce of the future in supply chain is really a challenge, especially with AI, right? My daughter actually just started a career as a consultant. She graduated from university last year and
Congratulations.
supply chain consultant. Yes, she didn't. The apple didn't fall far from the tree. But it is really a very different beginning of a career in consulting now than it was 30 years ago when I was going into it, right? I was out there building models and doing spreadsheets and doing the basic research. And she's doing that in 15 minutes now with AI, right? So she has a full-time assistant, right, with ChatGPT that I didn't have. And so she's able to very quickly start to do things that I wasn't exposed to until, or, didn't have basic skill sets to do for a couple of years into my career. That being said, there's a lot fewer of her today, right, than there were of me 30 years ago. So I think it is a challenge for organizations to figure out how they're going to create the supply chain talent, right, at the middle and senior levels if they're not bringing on the young talent in the beginnings of their career. So that's going to be a really interesting issue for organizations to solve over the next 5 or 10 years.
I absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. Ramji, same question for you. When you're working with supply chain leaders or other business leaders, what advice do you share with them? And given your career trajectory, if you have any career advice too, it'd be really interesting.
I would say that supply chain has got a great career, right? Because it was a career which was always the back rooms, was never as spoken about like marketing or finance. But I think the best thing about COVID was that supply chain came to the fore. And, supply chain is now in everybody's top agenda. Supply chains can be used to grow the company. Supply chains can be used to become better than your competition. Supply chain can be used to also come out of a problem. So if you look at it, supply chain has an answer to most problems, whether it's I don't have top line, I don't have bottom line, I don't have customers, I don't have regions, new markets. Supply chain is can be used as a powerful tool. Yes, so maybe the role of the supply chain person and the career will change. Exactly 30 years back, I had a different start, Jen had a different start. Maybe the young ones have a better start, but then the problems, to be honest, are the same. I still get the same problems from 30 years before that. Hey, I cannot get a plan done which is consistent and my plan is not followed. I cannot do a production plan. So it's just that how technology evolves to help them, but it's going to be a fascinating career for the young workforce.
I agree. I agree. It's an exciting career. And I absolutely encourage anyone who's listening in who's interested, young, or if you're looking to make a change mid career or later in career, supply chain is a wonderful place. This has been such a great conversation. Thank you both so much for being a part of this. For anybody who wants to get to learn more about either of you or about Bristlecone, where would you send them?
Yeah, please check us out on our LinkedIn handle or drop us a note at info@bristlecone.com. Our website's loaded with case studies and examples, and we would love to connect with you.
Thank you. Ramji, did you have any other links to add?
No, this is the corporate link, and yeah, that will be good to get to everybody in the leadership team, and we are happy to solve problems together.
Wonderful. Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you both so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Kerrie.
Appreciate it.
All right. That was Ramji Mani, Vice President, Digital Supply Chain Ecosystem and Executive Board, and Jennifer Chu, Vice President and Head of Solutions and Consulting, both with Bristlecone. And to everyone listening, thank you for being a part of the future of manufacturing.